Ladies and gentlemen, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak here at the opening of the important Economist Government Roundtable. It's an important forum of people that has a lot of influence. Unfortunately, it is happening during a dark time for Israel. On October 7th, on the day of the ending of Israeli high holidays, the Hamas terror army launched an unprovoked all-out war against Israel with a mass assault against our southern communities. The terrorists had a clear order to massacre and capture Israelis, while the attack was carried out under the cover of thousands of rockets launched against our cities. We learned about the attack from the sound of sirens, the noises of rockets, and the WhatsApp groups of friends living near the Gaza border, calling for help. We learn about it from the Arab social media that started to post horrific footage disseminated by Hamas. It was a massacre broadcast live by proud terrorists, while our people screamed for help. 30 of our communities were infiltrated. Innocent Israelis were butchered in atrocities that defy even the sickest imagination. Infants were decapitated. Pregnant mothers were disemboweled. Young children and their parents were burned alive. People were executed in cold blood in front of their families. Youth at the prime of their life were gunned down or blown to pieces in a music festival. Women were raped and utterly humiliated. Friends of ours were there. Friends of ours were kidnapped. A total of 1,400 people, and we're still counting, Israelis have lost their lives. More than 5,000 have been injured, many in critical condition. 222 so far, as we were able to verify, Israelis, among them foreign citizens, including babies, women, and elderly, were taken hostage by Hamas terrorists, tortured and led to Gaza, leaving their family members in despair. Their fate is unknown. Taking those hostages is a war crime. We call on the international community to demand their immediate and unconditional release. This day was also full of bravery of people fighting for their lives and those of their friends and loved ones. In 3 days of fighting, 1,500 terrorists were killed by the IDF, and the entire area taken by them, and the entire area that was taken by the terrorists within Israel was cleared. They left behind military-grade weapons and booby traps of bodies and children backpacks. October 7th will be marked as a day of darkness, etched into our history, akin to the somber memory of 9/11. Israel is now divided between a time before October 7 and after. We are now focused on winning the war forced upon us. One thing is certain. We all stand united in facing the threat, and there is no war more just than this. The Hamas revealed its true nature as a genocidal, murderous, criminal organization with a clear goal of the annihilation of the State of Israel. It gave us a dark glimpse into the future of genocide it envisioned for Israel and for its people. Hamas is the ISIS of Gaza. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is part of a radical extremist axis led by Iran that includes terror proxies like the Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Syria and Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen. Since the Hamas attack, the Hezbollah has been launching anti-tank missiles and rocket attacks on Israel and try to support infiltration of terror cells into our northern border. The Hezbollah is an experienced army of terror. It has a vast arsenal of weaponry, including precise missiles with heavy loads that most European armies do not possess. The Houthis launched 16 drones and cruise missiles against Israel, which were intercepted by US forces. We sent a clear warning to Iran and its proxies to stay out of the war. We will defend ourselves, and we are prepared to deal with any threat on any front. Israel is determined to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure and terror army built by Hamas ISIS in Gaza. We cannot allow a genocidal army of terror be on our borders. Its destruction will be actually give up hope for a better Middle East, better for Israel and better for our neighbors. Prior to the Hamas massacre, we were in the process of developing different visions for a new Middle East where parties are capable of solving conflict through peace, as evidenced by the Abraham Accords. In order to achieve that and continue on this path, we will have to defeat Hamas completely. There is much talk about the day after our military operation. But in order to get to the third floor, we first have to get to the foundation. The future will not include Hamas. Hamas is not a representative of the Palestinian. In the future, we will have to find a way to solve our conflict with our Palestinian neighbors. We will do it around the negotiating table. Our aim and actions are not rooted in vengeance. The truth is that without completely defeating the Hamas, we are only setting the stage for the next attack and for more terror. Don't be mistaken. Israel will do what it needs to do to uproot Hamas wherever and whenever necessary. Our battle against Hamas will not be short and will be carried out according to the pace dictated by us. We are not engaged in a battle against the Palestinian people, but against Hamas. It has brought nothing but pain, suffering, calamity, impoverishment of the people of Gaza. They are victims of the Hamas terror reign that occupied Gaza in a bloody coup against the Palestinian Authority in 2007. Under Gaza, there is an underground city with hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, not being used to protect civilians, but as a position for the terrorist activities of Hamas. We will have to dismantle this threat. We are acting to protect civilians in accordance with the international laws of war. We have called on the people of Gaza to move through safe passages, to safe areas in the north part of the Gaza Strip. So far, more than 700,000 have left northern Gaza, and we still call on the people to leave. We also allow the entry of humanitarian aid, food, water, and medical supplies. All this while Hamas is continuing to use Palestinian civilians as human shields. While the war on terror is continuing, it is important for the media to act professionally and responsibly, cross-checking facts, not believing the statements issued by Hamas, which is a cynical ISIS-like terror organization. The media have a role to play in not inflaming emotions The aim of Hamas, ISIS, and Hezbollah is to fan the flames of anti-Semitism worldwide, threatening the fabric of free societies as seen by the recent terror attacks in other capitals in Europe. We appreciate the support of the world, and in particular the US and European leaders. US President Joe Biden, decision to send battle groups to the region send a strong message to Iran and its allied proxies to stay out of the war, while sending message to US allies in the region of its commitment to their security. I want to thank Greece for its support for Israel's unreserved right to self-defense, its condemnation of Hamas, and its calls for the unconditional release of hostages. I want to especially thank Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who visited Israel yesterday and met with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a demonstration of solidarity which emphasized our strategic friendship. Mr. Mitsotakis also met with relatives of hostages, and I also want to thank members of the Greek public who expressed their solidarity to us. The war against Hamas will continue in the same manner and with the same determination with which the Islamic State was defeated. All leaders of Hamas and its terrorists should be held accountable. And we hope that after Hamas is defeated, the architecture of peace and cooperation will continue to grow. The war is not just a battle of Israel. It is a battle between those forces who believe in peace, stability, prosperity, and the well-being of people, and the forces of darkness, terrorism, and extremism led by the Iranian Ayatollah regime, whose vision is a nightmare for the region and beyond. In this battle, the democracy of Israel will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm aware that we're going over time, but if you forgive me, I think it's of interest to everybody that we take a few minutes for a further conversation about this. You mentioned the third floor of what happens after this conflict is over, and you say it won't be short, so presumably the day after is still some way away. But do you have some scenario of how this can evolve on the assumption that Hamas has been removed from the equation? Who is the interlocutor? Who could govern Gaza? How do you live in peace with your neighbor?
There were various thinking about this question in Israel and also beyond Israel in other places. Because when a democracy is going to war, it has and must think about that. I don't want to go into details. What we will need to see in Gaza is a governmental capability that is not Hamas. For sure, to generate something like this, if Hamas will be out of the equation, we will need a lot of support from neighboring countries and from the international community. I don't want to speak about the possible scenarios and structures, but we would like that Gaza will be governed by others. Israel has no intention to reoccupy Gaza Strip. We went out from Gaza Strip in 2005 in order not to return. We gave it to the Palestinian Authority, hoping that it will be another step on our way to end our conflict. It turned otherwise because of the bloody coup of Hamas. We will have to generate something that will be much more stable.
So in that equation, presumably the involvement of other Arab powers could be a critical element, and you have forged through the Abraham Accords new relationship with several of these states. How fragile are those relationships in the light of what is happening now?
I think that the architecture that was built, architecture of peace that started long ago with Egypt and then with Jordan and then was expanded to other countries through the Abraham Accords and joining countries. Also the talks that we had with the Saudis not long ago are reflecting a deep interest in the region to build that kind of architecture. And I think that the deep interests are there, and therefore I believe that in the future we will be back on track. I think that the relations are solid, are strong. We understand that this war is creating also a shock wave there. We are sure that they are looking on the way that Israel is capable of dealing with the threat, because part of the deep interest rely on the strength of Israel, and I'm sure that we will prevail.
So to take the specific example of Saudi Arabia, you were, by all accounts, quite close to perhaps having an agreement on, like the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia. Is that again possible in future, do you think, or is this now off the cards? And if it's off the cards, isn't that a big victory for Hamas and Iran?
We were in a process. I don't know how close we were, but we were in a process that reflects deep interest of the United States, of Saudi Arabia, of Israel, and of other countries. I think the interests are there. I think that the involvement of United States in this very conflict is also a sounding message that United States is committed to those interests. So I think that there is, of course, a kind of setback because we are in the middle of a war, but I think that in general, the trend is solid and desired.
Can I ask you finally for a question on your role as a diplomat and your colleagues in the Israeli diplomatic service? You have obviously a big role to play now as this conflict, horrible conflict, goes on. And perhaps it's possible to say it's not going terribly well in the sense of the public relations, if you like. After the dreadful events that you described so graphically, you can feel that the attention of the world quickly moves on to and understandably in some ways, to the suffering that is happening in Gaza. How can you, how do you in your role, play your part as far as Israel is concerned in keeping the attention on where you would like it to be?
Well, there are two issues here. First, as diplomats, we have to obtain government and state support for the just war that Israel is handling. I think that we have that. I think that we don't have differences in the way that we see not only the threat, but also the conduct of war. It's easier to people that are experts or to government people to understand that in a war, when it's done among civilians, there are many casualties. They are not the target, but sometimes they are there. That was the case in Raqqa. That was the case in Mosul. Gaza is no different, except of the fact that it is more covered by the media. So it will be a difficult task. But the war is not against Palestinians, and the war is not against the civilians that in Gaza. We will try to protect them as much as possible. That's why we ask them to leave to areas that are safe areas. We will not be able to avoid, and we will not be apologetic about the need to defeat Hamas, because we are serving the interest in the long run of the Palestinian people and the interest of Israelis and Palestinians, eventually to end politically the national conflict between our two people. It's going to be tough. Emotions and footage cannot be competed by explanation and logic, but we will have to complete the mission.
And in terms of humanitarian aid, because in the message that you say it's not against the Gazan people, sometimes this is a message that's hard to square with the cutting off of water, for example, and basic supplies.
I will set the record straight. Humanitarian aid will come and will come through the border of Egypt. It will include food and water and medicine, and it will go directly to the people, and we will supervise that it is not going into Hamas hands. If it will be going to Hamas hands, it will be stopped. Israel was supplying only 10% of the water of Gaza. You don't have a shortage of water in Gaza. We don't think that we should supply now the resources of Hamas. There is fuel in the Gaza Strip. It's in the bunkers of Hamas. They stole UNRWA fuel for their own purposes. So we try to serve the people and civilians that are not combatants, that are evacuated from the areas of war. But with Hamas, we will have a full war, and we will not supply Hamas. Unfortunately, like the Islamic State, Hamas has an effective control on the land and on the people and all the resources in the Gaza Strip. That's a situation of war. And I don't know in any other wars, including the wars that are now being handled in other places, including in Ukraine, that one side is supplying the other side.
Final question then there's also a propaganda war going on, and that you're clearly, if you like, a combatant on that as a diplomat. Is Israel doing as well as you would like in the propaganda war?
I don't believe in propaganda war. I think that
Call it an information war then.
There is an information war, but we don't have to equate truth with lies. The other side is cynical, is using lies, and the incident of the hospital was a clear example. On the night that the hospital was hit, I was speaking with members of the government and members of the political top echelon here in Greece. Gave them full information of what we know at the moment, saying that it most likely not Israel, but we are checking because we are a serious state and we want to verify facts. And I called them not to rush into statements. Many of them based on the wrong interpretation of a media that is eager to put the blame on Israel, took it for granted that Israel is attacking civilians, and publish it. And 2-3 days after the BBC and New York Times and others are redrawing, is too late because it's inflamed. There is no Ministry of Health in Gaza Strip. There is a Hamas Ministry of Health. They reported 500 children being killed. The numbers are totally exaggerated, as we all know. But in the numbers of casualties that they publish daily, 500 are included. At least be very cautious and critical about the information that you get from the other side. By the way, be critical of the information that you get from the Israeli side. That's the role of media. To rush into accusation, it's bad journalism, and it's bad for the societies and the people and the mission that you have to serve.
Thank you. Well, I wish we had longer, because that's very obviously important and also, I'm sure, very interesting for everybody in this room. But we have to move on to the rest of the program. So I'd like to thank you very much again for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.